Very much. Again, Anson from the Agency of Agriculture, and I've got the easiest job. I just get to ask questions again. So it's going to be really a fun morning. Well, first of all, I think we need to start with a little bit of history of how the businesses started. They may have started really, really small and grown over the years and got to the point where they wanted to be sold. Some of them are still maturing as we talk, and they've gone through some evolutions as well. So why don't we begin with Allison? So, Allison.
I sat here strategically.
No, it's...
Okay.
You never know when I'm going to come to you, so get ready. Allison, so talk about how it all started. We need a little bit of history and just a couple of minutes of your story.
Yeah, okay. So Bob Reese and I started Vermont Butter and Cheese Company in 1984. We each had $1,200. We converted my husband's milk house to make cheese, got a $4,000 loan from the United Church of Christ in Randolph, leveraged that with a $10,000 loan from the Randolph National Bank, put in a boiler, started making cheese, traveling around Vermont, picking up milk from backyard 4-H goat herds. And we grew the business on debt capital really ever since. We were nearly out of business, well, pretty much out of business on paper. In 1988, the bank pulled the plug. We had to raise, the Merchants Bank picked us up. We had to raise $150,000 in debt capital from friends and family. So we soldiered on and grew the business with these 14 shareholders ever since to about $28 million in sales, and had distribution coast to coast, 100 employees. And last March, we sold the business to Land O'Lakes, which is a farmer-owned co-op in Minnesota. We had started to have suitors about 7 years ago, and so we went through a fairly thoughtful, multi-year process about how we were either going to keep them away from us or entertain them. And at the end, we had 7 serious suitors, 4 strategic buyers, and 2 private equity firms, and settled with the co-op.
So 7 years, people started coming to you to see. That's a fair amount of time, 7 years. And how many years have you been in business? This is more than 30? 34 years. Ben Whitcomb from North Williston Cattle Company. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah.
There you are.
Okay. My father and uncle and I have a dairy farm we're partners in North Williston and in Essex Junction. I'm the 7th generation of the farm. My grandfather and uncle and father incorporated the business in the early 90s when a previous generation succession had not gone so well. The uncertainty of the land they were on wasn't certain, so they bought another farm and incorporated. A lot of the legwork for me coming into the business has already been done because there's already been a generational transfer that's gone really well from my grandfather to my father and uncle. Now we're just kind of fine tweaking it to work for my situation.
So I can well imagine there's a lot of pressure on you being the 7th generation.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're number 7. And also I think it's important to point out that this farm is right in the middle of a urban setting, so there's a lot of eyes on your particular operation, which I would imagine for you brings another added pressure with people around you and knowing your practices and how you operate.
Yep.
This is why we put dairy farmers on panels. They're pretty smart. All right, move along to Lisa, and Lisa is the former owner of Vermont Bread Company. And Lisa, what's your story?
So Vermont Bread Company started in a man's basement in Guilford, Vermont, and moved to spacious new facilities, 800 square feet in a goat barn down the street.
We got a theme going.
I joined the company when I was 21 years old, and I answered an ad for an assistant distribution manager. had no idea what I was doing, just showed up and just said, hey, I can figure this out. And so I worked with them from the time their sales were under 100,000 to almost $1 million by the time I was 25 years old. And I decided, this is wicked cool, I'm going to go do this for myself. I really love to do this. So I negotiated to buy a little bakery in Western Massachusetts. Came back to the owners of this company. It was a man, his father, and his brother-in-law. And I just said, hey, you guys have been great. I'll give you 6 months notice, whatever you need. I'm going to go do this for myself because I like it and I'm good at it. And 24 hours later, totally unexpectedly, they came back with an offer for me to buy out the brother-in-law. And then my long-term partner bought out the father, and together we bought out the original guy on the payment plan. So I've been on all sides of the buy-sell here. I started, from the time I was young, bought into this business, and then grew it. When I was 40, so Vermont Bread Company makes all natural and certified organic breads, rolls, and English muffins for supermarkets, natural product stores. Originally throughout the Northeast. We were the private label baker for Trader Joe's and Whole Foods as well. And by the time I turned 40, I realized that, as we all did, that our customers were consolidating. So we had lots of little supermarket chains and natural product store chains originally, and they all consolidated. So now you basically have Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and a couple of supermarket chains. So when that happened, at the same time, my suppliers were doing the same thing. So they were buying each other up. So I used to have lots of ways I could buy organic products from my company, and they just kept getting bought by Conagra, basically. And so I was in this position where I was a regional player, as all fresh wholesale bakeries are. You can service about 10 hours, in a radius from your plant. And so there were a few of us around the country that were like that. So we knew that we had to get bigger, but none of us had the money to make that happen. We were all, Vermont Bread, we grew at what we say on bootstrap and bank debt. And at one point, Vermont National Bank, thank God for Vermont National Bank, when I needed to expand, they helped me and they let me have, if you know anything about balance sheets, I had a debt to worth ratio of 11 to 1, which meant I had 11 times more debt than I had equity. And so they worked with me to make that happen. So when I realized that we had to get bigger, I went away when I turned 40, I took 40 days off. And I went away.
Only 40.
Only 40. But I had to think about this because it was really important to me to figure out what was going to happen with my company, because so many things were important. So I went away and I wrote down all the core values that were important to us. So I ended up with 20 pages of core values. And I realized no buyer was ever going to even talk to me if I had that. So I broke them down to 4 core values. So they were, let's see if I remember them. They had to have a commitment to organic agriculture because that's where we were really focused on. They had to keep the jobs in southern Vermont. We had 100 livable wage jobs there. They had to stay there. They had to have an employee ownership program because up until the point that I sold the company, it really wasn't worth owning stock in it, because the last time I ran out of cash was 2 weeks before I made this big transition with a private equity firm back to the bootstrap and bank. And then the 4th value was that there was no wimpy deals. Remember Wimpy from Popeye? I gladly pay you on Tuesday for a hamburger today. So we weren't going to do any wimpy deals. So those were the 4 core values that I went out to the marketplace to look for the right partner to do this. And so I did that when I was 40, and we closed when I was 44.
So 4 years?
4 years, yeah. And then I lived my life backwards, and I went back and got, because I didn't want to be the CEO of a $150 million company. That did not sound like fun to me. I like little companies. That was much more fun. So one of the criteria was they had to bring in a CEO. And so I went back to school, got my MBA, and on the last day of my MBA program, the final paper was due. This was April 2014. At 9 o'clock in the morning, so 8:59, I submit my final paper, and at 9:01 we hit the Wall Street Journal because we had sold the second half of our company to a public company. So I've got a lot of different perspectives on, both on the buy side and sell side. We sold half of our company to a public company and half to a private company. And the jobs, I'm happy to say, are still in southern Vermont, and they're still buying tons of organic wheat, so I feel good about that.
Thank you. All right, going to move to the after 5 o'clock crowd now. Let's begin with Ryan. And Ryan, company relatively, it's probably a relatively young company, but it's gone through a transition recently from Caledonia Spirits. Ryan, your story.
Yeah, so Ryan from Caledonia Spirits. So Caledonia Spirits was started by a man named Todd Harding. Todd is kind of a rock star, a hero to beekeeping and agriculture, from my perspective. And So Todd was trying to start a distillery. Todd is an incredible salesman, an incredible marketer, incredible visionary, and storyteller, but he's not a distiller. And I was in a town called Plainfield, about 25 miles south of Hardwick, owner and operator of a local potion homebrewing store. So my job there was selling barley, selling hops, teaching people how to make beer. It's kind of the dream job that I let go, and I don't know why. But I really wanted to, I was actually in the process of selling that store to pursue a dream of opening a brewery. But at that time I thought brewing was a bubble, and it would soon pop, and now that bubble is running a lot from there. But regardless, I was introduced to Todd. I got incredibly excited about his story, his focus on health of the hive and raw honey in the marketplace, and bringing it into the distilling space that really hadn't been done yet. We didn't really know if it was going to work or not, but I basically committed to Todd that I'd give it a go for a year or so and see how it goes, and then we could talk about if I wanted to go back to that dark side of brewing. No offense, Charlie. He said, that's fine, let's try that. So we took products to market. Todd was selling, I was producing. And it really just caught on. It really just grew and grew and grew very, very quickly. Todd is an incredible salesman, and we were just making gin as fast as we possibly could at the distillery. And we did that, for that year, and then we started to talk, and he said, well, we need to work out an equity plan. And we said, well, let's see if we can gain that traction. Let's keep with the momentum, then we'll figure it out later, because it's so darn easy, right? Well, in 2014, we decided to revisit it because we really had some real traction. And so we talked to lawyers, we talked to accountants, and found out that it's not that easy at that time. Now that there's real share value, there's real investor interest, there's real banking concerns, and you can't just take a chunk of a company and just hand it off to the guy that's been making the gin. So, and that was fine. I think we were going to work through that, but Todd said, I really want to be a farmer. I was a farmer before, I was a beekeeper, and I really want to get back to the farm. And I said, well, we're filling barrels full of whiskey, and we haven't emptied any of them yet. I really want to be a distiller that tastes the products that he makes. And so I was very interested in buying the company from Todd. I had no idea how I was going to come up with the money, but I said, of course, Todd, I would love to buy the company from you. So then I reached out to, local community members, investors, bankers, basically anybody that was willing to take a phone call or a meeting with me and said, here's my plan, here's my dream, here's my passion, here's what I'm trying to do. I was fortunate to have a wonderful business partner in Minty Koenig, who's a licensed CPA, and kind of brings that, I'm kind of like the car dodging between the lines. It's not a drinking and driving joke, I assure you, but she keeps us, on that business mindset. So anyway, I was successful in raising the capital. I bought the company from Todd with some partners. We've continued to grow the company. We started that process at the end of 2014. We closed in July of 2015. Todd today is a farmer. He's taken most of the proceeds of that sale, invested it in growing grain, the grain store at Thornhill Farm. We're now buying rye and buying barley. He's smoking the barley on site with cherry and applewood from the farm. So now the agricultural story is richer and more complex, and not only tied to bees, but also extending into grain production. And the company is doing quite well today.
Thank you. And now we want to move on to Charles Story with Harpoon Brewery. Your story.
Well, thank you, and I just want to start by saying it's nice to see, well, first of all, after 5:30 crowd up here, and have beer put in the context of a food. It certainly played that role since the beginning of civilization. Anyway, Harpoon was started in 1986, so that was before the term craft beer hit the vocabulary, before there's sort of every zip code had a brewery. And it was started by three friends. They raised money from family and friends through sale of equity. They retained shares as the principal shareholder. Fairly early in the progress of the company, one of those original founders left. The company purchased his shares. And then, if you fast forward to 2010, craft beer was certainly established as a growing and vibrant part of the beer business, and as well, the original founders were beginning to contemplate exit strategies, and there was all kinds of options on the table. One of those two guys wished to remain with the company until retirement. The other one was ready to sell his shares. And that dialogue included some values. Those values were to maintain the original culture and mission of the company, sort of our soul, for lack of a better word. And the other value was to make sure that the employees would still have their jobs. And I suppose the third value was to make sure that the selling shareholder got good value. It wasn't a bargain sale of his shares. And ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan, looked like the right thing for us. And Employee Stock Ownership Plan isn't actually selling the shares to the employees, it's actually giving the shares to the employees. So we're 48% employee owned. Our plan is to become 100% employee owned as the remaining principal shareholder hits retirement, leaves the business, and the other shareholders, there's only a handful of other shareholders, they will also sell their shares to a trust that, again, this trust is governed by a pretty complex set of rules and regulations set forth by the federal government. And that trust, in turn, disperses its shares to the employees according to a timetable and according to a plan. So that's the Harpoon story.
We're going to have time for questions for from the audience in a few moments as well. But Allison, at what point in your company did you begin discussions like, okay, I've got to take it to the next level, or I'm not going to be able to take it to the next level and I need to think about passing it along?
The second day? I think that when we were growing, I think in about 2013, we were growing about 30% a year. And that was just crazy. And we were able to finance that through our own cash, which was great, but we knew that that was going to be hard to sustain. So what we did was, before we knew exactly what that transition was going to look like, we said, look, we've got to get our house in order and develop leadership in the company, develop a strong management team so that Bob and I could step back and try to make ourselves a little more invisible, so that whoever the new owner was, be they the employees or a strategic buyer or private equity, they had a strong team in place to just run the business. So that was rule number one. And secondly, we continue to invest strongly in the business. I think what people tend to do sometimes is they're advised, stop spending money, conserve your cash, clean up your books so that you look pretty to a buyer. Buyers are pretty smart about that, and they want to make sure that you continue to feed the beast, keep momentum, and keep running the business as if you were going to run it forever. And so we sort of did those two things, and I think that was key to. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. And Lisa, when you're thinking about the transition, who are the key advisors that you need about it? Is there one particular, is it a lawyer? Is it a CPA? Is it a family friend? Who do you need around you to give you solid, loyal advice?
One of the things that I was fortunate to write a book with Margot Fraser, who's the founder of Birkenstock USA. And one of the core pieces of advice that I give every entrepreneur is to, as early as you can, get an advisory board around you. Get a strong group of people that have a really different perspectives. And so whether it's a lawyer, someone who's running a business smaller than yours, but they do something better than you, someone who's running a bigger company than you, so that they can help you get through the cliffs that happen in your company, that happen to all companies. So I had a really strong advisory board during this time, and I was fortunate to meet through my network someone who has done a lot of deals in this space. And he came on board pretty early. He was able to really help me clean up. I know we're talking about cleaning up your balance sheet, all that kind of stuff. It does take a while to do that. And we had 3 different entities, so I had to like get them all aligned and worked out. And he helped me through that. So finding someone like him, or at least a strong advisory board that can help you get through those things, is an important piece. And he wrote it through. And one of my best friends is a lawyer who does deals, and so she was there as well. She actually ran the legal side of my deal. And so, just really getting good help there is critical. And as early as you can, as you start to think about, what does this look like going forward. And one of the things that he helped me to do, in the baking business, it's pretty much a given that your sales number, what you sell your company for, is 3 to 4 times EBITDA. But working with him and structuring it in a way, and I'm happy to talk to anybody, from now until 10 years from now, if you want some advice about this, is to position yourself to be doing some experiments within your company that show like hockey stick growth potential in areas. And so instead of getting 3 to 4 times EBITDA, with his help and my advisory board help, we got 15 times. Actually it was 30 times EBITDA. And so there's things that you can do to position yourself in a way that can add value as you're getting ready to exit. And so getting a good group around you, I think, is critical.